This is the Mike and Mike show. I'm Mike Jones. This is Mike Getz. Real quick, I want to thank you guys for spending some time with us. And I want to just level set everybody that this session isn't a deep dive conversation about vulnerability management or security incident response or how great cybersecurity is in the marketplace. This is really a perspective, a point of view. So I've been in this business a little while. I mean, most of you guys have the same color hair as I do. We've been at this a long time, and we've seen this kind of trend growing in cybersecurity. And what we've seen from a service management and ServiceNow perspective is there's this dire need for automation as a result. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but if you think back 10, 15 years, network, there was always a trend where we didn't have enough network administrators or network certified people. There's a big boom of getting Cisco certified people. We're kind of in that boom of security. It's so hard to get people certified. Security, information security, and keeping those same people to do that work. It's a hot commodity organization. Today, there's even classes in schools about doing security and security. So what we're going to talk about is really around that perspective. So real quick, first and foremost, we're going to lay the groundwork around security automation. You guys have heard a term we're going to use a little bit today, but security automation in the sense of, is it just security operations and automated response, or is it more than that as to driving IT, security, legal, facilities, and all the other organizations that come together? So we'll talk about that. We'll define some outcomes. So when I spend time with CISOs and security operations, so I was a couple blocks from here back, I think it was July. Who was there? Called Black Hat. It's a little bit bigger conference than this, right? There's more security nerds than there are now nerds, apparently. But that experience of being there with all these people, I started learning and hearing all these same conversations about what they need to do to improve their organization. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the things that we heard over the course of the last year around that, things that I've learned in my career around what it means from a security perspective and the outcomes we're looking at. We'll talk about the potential impact. And I don't want you to be afraid of that word, impact. It's not always a bad thing. Impact can be good. So how can we help not only security operations organizations, but how do we help IT and the rest of our company get better at driving security response in a faster way and using automation as a backbone? And then I'll turn it over to Mike to kind of take us through a little bit architect-y thing. Right? A little bit deeper into the weeds of what are the integrations like? What are the reference architecture components that make up this system security automation? That makes sense? Anything else you want to talk about? We can talk about later. All right. So here's my joke for you architects in the room. How do you know an architect is an extrovert? He's staring at your shoes. Sorry. I don't know. I told you it was good. It wasn't funny. All right. So my name is Mike Jones. I run a team in the Americas around architecture, specifically executive architecture, part of a program now called the Inspire Program. It's an executive advisory program. We work with some of the largest customers around the world to really help them drive strategy, drive approach, and really go towards outcome. We're not there to talk about the widgets, right, and how to write jQuery or anything like that. We're there about how do you drive outcomes. So we're looking at from an executive down perspective, less than a bottom up. I've been doing this stuff for a while. I always put like 20 plus. That's it. That's as high as I'm going to go. When it gets to 30 plus or 40 plus, I'm still going to say 20 plus, right? That's my moniker. Because after that, it's like, yeah, it's the Moore's law of physics, right? But I've been doing service management. I've been doing security management, operations management, cloud management for a long time. Prior to coming to ServiceNow, I spent some time with this three-letter acronym called IBM. You guys may have heard of them. Where I was the CISO, CIO, CFO for the cloud innovation labs around. So I got to deal with this stuff on a first-hand basis, and I got to hold all those titles. So great, right? I got to pay myself, right? I got to change my own passwords. But you get the idea. And then what we're doing today is really driving a lot of these conversations with some of our largest customers. And how do they drive this system of X, system of automation, security, system of insight, system of machine learning? How do we use ServiceNow as a platform to help drive a lot of those? All right, Mr. Getz.
So, apologize for the voice. A little bit of the dry air generally gets me to talk like Vito Corleone. I'll try to do my best to stay clear. So my name is Michael Getz. I am on the Inspire Architect team in North America, so I work for Mike here. I've been with ServiceNow for about 2.5 years. I too have been around 20 plus years, and I think I'm going to take on that philosophy of how I represent how long I've been in the industry, but I've been in IT technology. I've worn many hats. I came from a 2-letter acronym company, which is a direct competitor over here. CA, I spent many years over there working in the IT service management space. And I spent a little time actually in IT itself as an architect responsible for ITSM operations. Touched quite a bit of security because we had quite a bit of responsibility over with the security folks.
Cool. Thanks, Mike. All right, you guys know who we are. There'll be a quiz later, as I see in the hallway or at the bar. All right. So real quick, this is what we're hoping you will learn from this. If you don't, I apologize now ahead of time. But what I want you to be able to take away from this is how ServiceNow plays in overall architecture, this overall plan. So what are the elements that make this up? What are the key outcomes of those components? What is the impact security automation has on the enterprise? When I say enterprise, I'm not just talking about IT or facilities or legal. I'm talking about the entire enterprise of the organization and how automation plays a part across all of that. And this is not something that you guys probably don't already know, right? It's really putting into a framework that you can reuse as you're having those. And it's a point of view. It's my point of view. If you guys have an idea or a change, that's why we're here. We're a community, right? To be able to share that information. If you guys have heard things or seen things that are different, how do we bring? So, whoops. Automation, a little too much. There we go. All right. So whenever I sit with a CISO or a security operations analyst or someone that has to deal with risk in an organization, the 3 things they always bring up to me is I need to be able to identify, contain, and eradicate. And there's other ways to think of this, right? If you look at Gartner and other ways, right? I need to detect and prevent. And there are hundreds, if not thousands of tools in the marketplace that do a really great job of identifying what's out there, what's impacting. There's national databases of information. There are companies that make their living on that piece of the puzzle, right? But the problem is it's a lot of tools. We grew up in this world in IT. We grew up in a world of technology where we just keep adding more and more tools and technology, and then we become the integration hub of bringing those tools together. So there's a lot of tools that are involved in making that happen. If you look at from an identification perspective, the mean time to identify a breach or a threat is an average of 200 days. That's a long time to realize something broke, that something could impact your organization, right? The vectors that are coming in, these threats that are coming into our organizations and coming from our organizations are changing on a daily basis, a minute by minute basis. Whether it's in, spear phishing or whaling or whatever that particular element is, or it's malware that's being created, or viruses are being created, or IDS attacks are coming in. All those things are coming at us a mile a minute. I mean, IT used to have to deal with events coming from servers, right? From a security perspective, you're coming in from events from firewalls, from Qualys, from FireEye, from all these technologies that are coming in, telling us that something's going on, right? The landscape of the infrastructure is changing. I mean, how many of you guys grew up in the mainframe world, right? The first computer, right? But since those days, now we have cloud. We have virtual machines. We have containers inside virtual machines. Applications used to be just an application running on a server. Now it's running across multiple. And we've got microservices that we've got to watch, right? We've got databases that are proliferated across systems. We've got, I hate this term, we have lakes of data or data lakes, data lagoons, data oceans. All these different technologies are permeating across our organization, and we got to protect them. And understanding that technology keeps us moving forward in that. And then, of course, all those events from all those tools are constantly coming at us. How do we make sense of what's coming in? What's the priority, right? And what's the criticality of that? So it gets into contain. Now I've got the events. That's great. Millions of them coming in minute by minute. How do I prioritize which ones I work on first? Anybody got a clue? How do you pick which one to work on? First in, first out? You get an answer? You have to. Right? It could be a CVE. Exactly, right? But the other part of that is the criticality of that particular event or that particular issue coming in. How does that correlate to the criticality of the service or the application or the component that's happening on? How do we tie those two worlds together? And a lot of times, that information is in different places. It's in different databases. It's in different tools. If you got QRadar, there's a database over there. If you've got this technology over here, another SIEM, you've got database information over here. It may not be the same. You've got an asset repository that's got different information. How do you know which is? And then you think about that, because of that silo approach that we've been dealing with for a couple of decades, that mean time to contain is up to 70 days. Once I even know there's a problem, it takes me 70 days potentially to contain that. And then the contextual knowledge is fragmented because my network team knows part of it, my security team knows part of it, my IT team knows part of it. Getting all that information, all that knowledge, all that connective tissue together is difficult for us to make a good decision on containment. And then, of course, once I figured out what it is, I now got to go work with other teams to go fix it. I got to call the IT team to go fix that Linux server that has that vulnerability. I've got to go to this team who has to patch those systems. I have to go to the firewall team that has to turn this port configuration or iOS configuration a different way. I have to do all that handoff. How is that correlated, right? So now we've got containment. We've prioritized, we've categorized, we know which elements are more important. Okay, then how do we get rid of them? The best way to get rid of something is not to have it in the first place. So better prevention, right? But we're only going to be able to stop so much. There's still tons of data that's coming in because it's so much. We still have to find a way to get rid of it in a quick, responsive way. And this problem is the one that I talked about earlier, is the people we have, we don't have enough people in the security operations. There's just not enough of them. There's not enough security analysts that know enough about security, about what the threats are coming in, know about the traffic that's coming in. There's just not enough of us out there. Then the other part is, when we look at automation and eradicating and eliminating these issues, a lot of the work we've done in the past has been around patching. We know there's an issue with Microsoft or Linux or XYZ or this application type, and we do patching. That's always reactive. Anyone who ever says, I do proactive patching, the fact that you're doing patching is a reaction to something broken on the system, right? Kind of a backwards process. A lot of the tasks that we're doing to fix the systems, to fix the networks, to fix the elements before they cause havoc are done manually by different. And then the tools and approaches we even use for automation are not connected together. Security has their automation technology, IT has theirs. This group over here, they have theirs. It's a DevOps team that has their little cool tools over here. And we're not bringing them together to solve the problem. We're solving our individual issues. And then, of course, the priority of what automation, right? It's not fully scoped. We do one piece at a time. We chunk away at those elements. Just making sense. This is a problem statement we all pretty much know, right? So this comment came out of this acronym called SOAR. How many of you guys have heard of that? So SOAR has a couple different definitions, depending who you ask. Security operations, automated response is probably the best known one. There's also one that says analytics and reporting, which is kind of a reaction mode, right? But the idea is that when we look at it from a ServiceNow perspective, SOAR is great from a operational management of incidents and vulnerabilities and processes, and from an automated response. But there's also this automation that happens across the gambit. So we'll talk about what that is. That truly is, to us, that system of automation. Put it another way, I just put this visual up there. I mean, this is the world we live in from a security perspective. And I couldn't fit all the vendors at Black Hat and DEF CON on the screen. Believe me, any of you guys been to the expo here? There's a lot of partners, right? Imagine 5 times that size just for security. I mean, literally, I got lost walking between the different sections, right? And I had to bring out my map a couple of times. Like, oh, yeah, I know. I've seen that guy before, right? There's so many tools and technology, and a lot of them are great. They're awesome technology components that are out there doing a specific job. The problem is all that's funneling in to a finite number of resources to fix it and to do work with it. The time of detection is too long, so Pony Mountain Institute did a couple studies over the last couple of years, and they're the ones that came up with this 200-day time frame across multiple industries, multiple organizations. Once again, all that is happening to the same finite set of resources. They got to get the work done. And then to contain that process in 70 days, same perspective. Who's going to contain it? Who's going to go do the work that needs to get done? Now, the other part that was part of that study is that when they looked at it, over 70% of the vulnerabilities were already known vulnerabilities. We already knew about them. They just weren't that important at that time. I mean, if you think about it, a lot of the malware and a lot of the issues that we've seen over the last couple of years are due to threats or due to vulnerabilities in systems that we've known about. We just didn't fix, we didn't patch, because they weren't that priority. They weren't seen as a higher priority in the environment. Some were just taking advantage of capabilities no one knew about. This clicker is like on truly automation. So how many of you guys have seen a slide like this? At least once at this conference, right? I'm just going to spend a few minutes on this, but at ServiceNow, we have a cloud ecosystem, right? Highly available, built for scale, designed to do that, always on, right? We applied to that cloud ecosystem a platform. You heard the keynote talk about Fred Luddy and his mindset 14 years ago, how this company grew from that, right? And then what we did is on top of that platform is we started to put in these purposely built applications. And just a quick story on security operations as a technology now. It's only been a technology for the last 2 years, not even 2 years. It started as technology in our own data center. So our CISO and our security team actually used these technologies before we released these products to the market to prove that it actually worked, first and foremost, but also to figure out how we use it as part of the ecosystem for Speedy, our CIO, to make sure it's part of our ecosystem of IT, and then from our CISO's perspective, part of that process as well. So if you look at it from this...
It's not me, is it?
I didn't do it.
I wasn't.
Kind of vibrating. So security incident response, SIR, taking all those events into a collective pattern, right? Making sense of them, routing the work that needs to be done across the organization.
Sorry.
Is that me?
That was you.
All right. Testing. All right. It's like every time I walk.
Oh, that's not bad right there. That was pretty good. Wow.
Better now? We're done. Oh, where was I? Oh, so on security incident response, bringing all those events and processing the work to the right teams that need to go do that work, right? Common process in order to drive that from a security incident. And there's a difference between a security incident and an IT incident. We'll be very clear about that. But the idea is really to control and kind of funnel that work and help do that prioritization of that work. In vulnerability response, this is kind of that getting more proactive. And like I said before, patch management is not a proactive thing. But if I can understand what the vulnerabilities are in my organization, and then align that to the right priority and categorization of what I need to fix when, then I can reduce that. I can reduce that vulnerability or that threat from that vulnerability, the risk from that vulnerability a lot more effectively. Then as we talk about things like threat intelligence is the ability to analyze the information in the system and to help me make better decisions of what I go fix now, where I apply the right resources, by looking at data and patterns of that data. So using machine learning, using concepts that are somewhat foreign to a lot of organizations, is let's look at what's happened in the past, let's look at how things have transpired and the patterns that they've had, and let's apply some process to it. Let's align our resources effectively for that. You guys heard of trusted security circles? You're all part of my trusted security circle today. Circle of trust. You don't get to, another bad joke, sorry. But trusted security circles is that peer-to-peer relationship between you and other organizations, sharing knowledge. I'll tell you, hackers are not, acting as individuals. They're acting as corporations. They group up on us, right? It's not like Anonymous just said, you know what, there's one guy. The one guy is sitting somewhere who's doing all this bad stuff. That's not the way it works. They group up. Someone has a really cool bot or someone has a really cool malware, they share it, they customize it, they give them ideas. When I was at DEF CON, they were teaching people how to hack, and how to write code, and how to interrogate the Broadcom firmware to make it do things it shouldn't do. They're a community. So we, as security practitioners, have to be a community as well. So using this concept of a trusted security circle is that I can start sharing, hey, what's impacting you? What are the things that are hitting you guys today that may be hitting me tomorrow? That's what it's about for a trusted security circle. And then part of that platform and approach is really around workflow. How does that work move from group to group, from organization to organization in an effective manner? How do I process that in an automated fashion? The right rules, the right skills, and I align it from security to IT, IT to legal, legal to facilities. How do I bring that all together? Today, in most security, or in a SOC or security organizations, it's all contained. And I'm not sharing that information out to other groups. I want to protect it. Maybe it's PI data, maybe it's something related to regulation, but from a security team, I'm not sharing because I don't know how. I don't have those tools and technologies. With workflow, I can do that. And I can provide them just enough information so they can do their job effectively. And then if you look at automation and orchestration, this is all about that remediation, right? The next step, once I've contained it, once I've known and categorized and prioritized, now I can actually do something about it. Whether it's to change, to apply a patch, or to update a firmware, or to change a firewall rule, or to update a port, whatever it may be that's going to prevent that from being worse in my organization. And if I detect a breach, how do I run the right security rules to put them down the honeypot or to put them in the right direction? So protecting those systems. And then the other part of that is this platform is all about this deep integration across teams, across IT, across groups. And it's the reporting side, the insight across all those different organizations to understand how well we're doing and getting better at that. So if we put that in the same framework, take that picture we just had, and we put it in the same framework as our problem statement, how do we start to solve for those things? And you don't have to worry about which icons fit in which category. I didn't have enough real estate to put them all up there. But the idea comes back to this. If I could start bringing in information from security operations and using platform capabilities together, a seamless, better together approach, then I can start doing automation from the time I understand there is a threat to the time I eradicate or eliminate it. I can watch that entire process. There may still be humans involved in it because I may still need an eyeball check to verify that it's real. I still may need a human being to go do some piece of that work, but I want to remediate and automate as much of the mundane tasks as I possibly can to free up my security operations team, which is already overworked. So we start with security threat vulnerabilities, getting connected with IT, getting connected with the data that's available to IT, using a common event bus to filter that information and the rules associated with it, have security and IT working together. So in my organization, when I ran the Cloud Innovation Labs, I created these tiger teams of security people, of IT people. They didn't work together normally, but we would always bring them together at certain times, right? Think about doing that. So You don't work together at all, and then in 1 week, you're all of a sudden you have to go work together. Different personalities, different ideas, different objectives, different outcomes. How do you get people to work together more effectively? If I've got a platform that could bring that collaborative feeling together to everyone's working on the same outcome and same purpose, then I can do it more effectively. And then you're preventing issues through better knowledge. So this one is a little bit tweaky, right? What if there's more self-service that allows my customers, my users, to understand what these potential threats are? A big one here in ServiceNow is they were testing out a mail phishing scam inside our company to see how many people would open it. Now, granted, right before that, they had a security flyer come out to say, beware of mail phishing or spear phishing that may be going on, right? There's all these different emails that are coming around. And then they sent out that email and wondered how many people read the first email, right? Kind of tricky on their part. But the first thing that people were doing was they were going to our self-service catalog, they were going to our knowledge base, and they were searching on those phishing emails. And they were getting detailed instructions on what to do with it. They didn't have to call the help desk. They didn't have to call security. They didn't have to call IT. They could process that right away. We're reducing more effort on the back end. And when they started to see that, they could start driving automation from it. In the middle, you see kind of this perspective of how do you do containment. Well, part of that is kind of knowing beforehand, getting proactive. All these different repositories exist, right, that have vulnerability information within them. Being able to bring that information in and then tie that particular vulnerability information back with my CMDB, my system of record for my IT resources, my servers, my applications, and to understand which of those are impacted. And to automatically understand the priority of those particular issues that are occurring. And then tying that once again to workflow to say where I need to go do work, where I need to force errors or force resources to be effective on it. And then as I get into, once I've contained all that, how do I then go and automate and eliminate through orchestration, through integration hub, through running the right set of scripts, the right set of tools to go fix those particular issues. Now, I'll tell you, in ServiceNow, we don't have like this big bundle of security scripts that you can go run and fix everything. But a lot of security operations teams already do this stuff on a daily basis. They have a tool set, or they have a script they run, or they have a manual process they run that we can then bring into automation. It's taking that and reusing it. There's a bunch that are out there, right? But every single one of them has to be tweaked and specifically configured to the organization that it's in. So just to give you guys some perspective, I mean, automation at its core is, it's not a scary thing, right? But the impact on the organization, the impact on the enterprise of bringing groups together, automating mundane tasks, allows us to be more effective. That's a true statement that you can't deny. But if you look at it from a monetary perspective, just think of the money of not automating. So it's just a simple example of event management. Let's imagine that the number of events are going to increase exponentially over the next couple of years. Can we all agree that events will continue to grow? Does anyone think there will be less security events between now and, say, 3 years from now? I don't think so. Exactly. Now let's bring IoT into this space, right? All these sensors that are out there. Wow, wait, what's next, right? So they're going to go exponentially. So let's just say we have the same number of people. This is for some simple math. I know it's Wednesday, almost 4 o'clock, right? Same number of people, 3 times the number of events. We're going to have to hire people. No automation. So in order to take care of all those events coming in and actually do that work, we're going to have to increase the number of heads. So we did an estimate. We did this work with a very large retail organization and came back with $1.5 million increase in labor costs associated with the number of events they were going to see over the next 3 years. And then we did a comparison. If we introduced automation to reduce the number of events, but more importantly, not reduce events because they're not going to be going away, but reduce the number of events that impacted the organization, that required additional work to be performed, we could reduce that number dramatically to a flat line almost, even decrease it. Because a lot of the events that were coming in could be automatically resolved or responded to through simple patch or a change or a rule that could be updated very quickly. That were being done by security operations and IT teams already, but taking days to do it. All right, so I have taken you through the higher level 10, 15,000 foot view of it, the problem statement, kind of where we see the security automation kind of fitting together across the ServiceNow platform. I'm going to let Mr. Getz take you down the rabbit hole of reference architecture and integrations to a little bit more technical level. Sound good? Cool.
So as typical would be in my group, the boss gets the majority of the time, and now I'm going to try to cram 40 minutes worth of stuff into 20. Love it. Nah, we're good. We're good. This is, love working with you. So before we begin and looking at some of the technical aspects of it, what I'd like to start to do is, this is an enterprise architect track within CreatorCon. And so let's take an enterprise architect perspective on looking at a system of security automation. And what I did here was, if we were going to go ahead and take an EA look, I went to TOGAF as a reference, a frame of reference, to then be able to build out what that perspective would be. And so we can look at it across 3 layers: strategy. How does a system of security automation meet the strategic needs of the business? Segment. Where within the organization are we going to go ahead and drive and manage a system of security automation? And then capabilities. What are the things that we're going to do, or what are the things that we need to do in order to be able to deliver a system of security automation? Essentially the why, the who, and the what. So let's start off with the why. All right? Oh, come on. Hello? Am I missing? Oh, there we go. Okay. All right, so first and foremost, we want to increase the level of security within the enterprise without impacting the business. The business is most important. Yes, security is a very important piece of it, but it's a necessary evil to ensure that we are protecting the ability to conduct business. And so we need to be able to ensure that we can do that without impacting the business. We need to be able to reduce our overall risk, protecting our information and technology assets. We want to be able to minimize reliance on scarce security professionals. As Mike mentioned before, when we talked a little bit about labor costs, one of the things about security professionals, they're not cheap and they're not easy to come by. There are probably way more jobs, security jobs available out there than there are skilled security people to fill those jobs. And so our reliance on being able to fill those jobs, regardless of how much we have to pay them, we might be working on a resource constraint to begin with. So we need to be able to minimize the reliance on it. And then finally, security is a team effort. It's not going to be done by one group within the organization. All right, we need to be able to traverse multiple teams because they all have to be able to participate in the ability to protect the technology and the technology assets as well as the business. So the who, it's simple, right? There's a lot of names for it out there. It used to be called IT security. There's probably still many of you out there that still call it IT security. Cybersecurity is a little bit more of a trendy term these days. There are differences between the two. They're very nuanced. I don't think it's necessary for this particular conversation. But this would be the who within the organization. That we would then define system of security automation. So finally, let's look at the what. And as we look at the what I went ahead and did was I went to NIST. And NIST defined a series of abilities and categories of those abilities. I use this as a frame of reference to define the what's. So first, there's identification. Can we identify what the risks are to the organization? And how they can be manifested. Protect. What can we do to ensure that we're protecting against these threats within the organization? Detect. When they occur, when a cybersecurity event occurs or is about to occur, do we have the ability to understand what's happening to us? And then respond. What do we do about it when it occurs? Can we contain it? Can we eradicate it? And then finally, recovery. What do we do to restore business continuity? How do we restore business services? And then what can we do to be more resilient in the future? And so as I look at we break this further down, NIST goes ahead and actually defines a whole slew of abilities that fall within these categories. I'm not going to get into each and every one of these, but I have highlighted the ones that would fall or that I think align to a system of security automation. Asset management, being able to know where we are, business environment, having the context, performing maintenance, protective technologies, anomalies and events monitoring, detection processes, having a response plan, communication to when an event is occurring and to ensure that the appropriate stakeholders are informed, analysis of the data, risk mitigation, making improvements to your overall process, and then finally in recovery, having a recovery plan, ensuring that you make improvements to make your environment more resilient, and communication again, but not communication in the context of an event, but communication in terms of the change management that then needs to be done across the enterprise to ensure that you're now resilient against the cyber event that you are already, a cybersecurity event that you've already experienced. So let's look at the reference architecture and take a little bit at how this would break down using ServiceNow as a system of security automation. Right? And this would be essentially the how, right? We covered the who, we covered the why, the who and the what. So this would now be the how. So we start off with strategic drivers. We mentioned those earlier in the in the enterprise architecture strategic layer, right? Can we increase our security posture? Can we reduce risk? Can we minimize reliance on scarce resources? And can we improve collaboration? The beneficiaries for all of this are going to be IT and security. They are the primary beneficiaries of this. But certainly the business and the customer and your customers are also going to benefit from that. When you consider who you're trying to protect and what services you're trying to ensure that you're able to deliver. So I would break down the reference architecture into, we might mention before, systems of X. There are three key systems of X that we'll talk to: a system of engagement, a system of action, and a system of insight. A system of engagement, excuse me. The system of engagement is where we're looking, how do we engage, how do we interact with the system of security automation? This is where we're looking at security incident event management, detection systems, being able to be the automated piece for being able to then understand security events when they happen, and then to be able to initiate the work that then needs to be done. But security incidents response and vulnerability response, providing us the means for the fulfillment actors, the human beings and the automation pieces that need to then conduct the work, that provides the touch points for those pieces to be able to then interact across a system of action. This is where we're applying the work that needs to be done, ensuring that the right actors, whether they are human actors or they're automated actors, are able then to execute the pieces of work. And as we mentioned, in this, the theme of this particular discussion is about driving more of that towards automated interaction. And so here, workflow is an important piece because it's orchestrating all of the work that needs to be done. We're able to assign tasks. We're able to initiate actions, automated actions. We're able to send commands. We're able to send communications, notifications, etc. All of that's driven through workflow and then using orchestration as we define it within ServiceNow, the ability to extend workflow so that you can then reach outside the platform itself and touch other areas that's then going to allow you to drive that work. But there are other areas that also can then feed into the system of action that can help us take information, be able to enrich the data that we have. So threat intelligence, trusted security circles, give us some of that additional information in allowing us to enrich what's going on. What information do we have to be able to better identify and take and drive the policy or drive the decision making that then needs to be done to respond to the event that's occurring. And configuration compliance being a way to, one, understand whether or not you have things that are represent risk or take automated action to then remediate them. Finally, within a system of insight, we can then look at consuming data from all of the systems that then participate, so that we can then make heads or tails out of this. We can drive SLAs. We can then drive trending to be able to make decisions about how we want to do things within the future. All of this is then enriched with the rest of the capabilities within the platform, most notably ITSM capabilities that are going to allow us to add additional business context, IT context, so that we can then do more and drive better decisions about how we're going to respond to these security events. All of this then allows us to realize a couple of key benefits. We're going to be able to reduce the time to accurately detect critical threats because we're collecting information to a single place. We're automatically enriching that information. We're able to correctly prioritize threats based on business impact because we have that business context built within the platform and we're able to bring that in. Reduce the time to respond and remediate, reduce the effort and reliance on manual tasks, thereby driving more consistent levels of response and improving productivity. And finally, optimizing the processes that traverse the organization so that we can break down the silos between disparate organizations like IT and security and the business that all have to really work together and collaborate together in order to be able to respond to things that have happened or are going to happen. So let's look at a few different cases. So what I've done here is I've painted a picture of some of the capabilities that we talked about in the enterprise architecture layers, right? And this is really how some of these capabilities are manifested within the platform and some of the extended family. You can see that there are third-party capabilities that are out here that you're probably tools and systems that you use within your environment and how these things are going to fit together. So let's first talk about detection, right? So we have threat detection and security incident and event management systems that are going to be able to collect or collect information about what's going on. They can the threat detection systems can either send them through the SIEMs, send them directly to our own event management, and then from our own event management, we can then start to correlate this to how we want to respond. And most notably, we'll respond with this to a security incident. The security incident now becomes the method of engagement with all the various actors that are going to be involved. As I said, we have human actors. People are going to have to now look at the information, make heads or tails of it, or we can then initiate workflows from here. Now, if we step away for a second from this, and I'll come back to the security incident flow here in just a second. We have automation that I just kind of want to bring out that's in other areas of the platform, not necessarily directly tied to security. Most notably, our CMDB and service mapping. We have discovery tools that allow you then to build the CMDB. We have service mapping tools that allow you now to aggregate up your infrastructure and roll it up and provide traceability back to business services, so you therefore have that business context. And we can take that information and we can now associate that back to the security incident. Now we have additional information about the business context that we can now use to help drive some of the decision making from within the security incident itself. From there, we're able now to leverage workflow because workflow is tied to pretty much any piece of data within ServiceNow. But in this particular case, we're going to drive it directly out of the security incident. It's only one of many ways you can access workflow. In this particular case, I'm talking about it from this perspective. I saw that you had a question. If you don't mind, we'll just hold it. So once I'm now able to initiate a workflow, I can assign security incident tasks. I can reach out to our friends over in IT and orchestrate, inform them about incidents, changes, associate any or assign any of the tasks that need to be done to now respond to that particular incident. If I need to, or if I have the ability to, leverage orchestration, extend workflow, reach out to our configuration automation systems or cloud management systems to send commands to the various systems that are going to say, hey, we need to apply a patch. We need to remove this person from an Active Directory groups because they have access to something and they're doing something malicious. Or we just need to shut down the server itself because we want to contain this thing. We have no idea what to do with it yet, so we're just going to contain it, quarantine it, till we know what to do with it. All of those use cases are available and can be orchestrated through workflow. Let's take a look at a different use case here. Let's start off with threat intelligence. So from here, we can take information from threat intelligence systems. We can grab STIX data, leveraging STIX data using Taxi to then bring that into an indicator of compromise. Once we have an indicator of compromise, we're then able to then generate a case. And now we have threat case management that'll then allow us to manage the response that we're going to then take against this particular threat that we've now identified out there. Once we have the case, again, we can then associate workflow, which then allows us to then interact with security incidents, case tasks, security incident tasks, bring it over to IT service management, bring it down to orchestration to then interact with configuration automation, cloud management. The opportunities and the combinations of things that we can do are quite expansive. The last one that I'd like to talk about, which is probably the most interesting one and the one that has a tremendous amount of value, would be looking at it from vulnerability management. So all the cases that I spoke about before were reactive cases. Something's already happened. The house is on fire, and you're trying to put out the house on fire. But how do we prevent the house from getting on fire? Through vulnerability management. That would be the proactive approach. And this is the one that probably has the most value, although it may be the one harder to quantify the value, because it's easy to quantify a value once you're losing money or once you've had the incident. Showing how you reduce the risk of these events in the future, harder to quantify that value, but the one that probably has more value to you if you were able to appropriately do that quantification. We'll start with vulnerability data. We take vulnerability data, we're able then to generate vulnerability records, which then allows us to associate to vulnerability groups. By the way, this is one of many different routes that you can take in the vulnerability approach. I've just happened to pick this particular one. Once we have vulnerability groups, I can associate configuration items and assets to expand the scope of what the reach is, or how expansive or what the surface area of this threat is within the organization. And then from there, we can then generate the security incidents, which then allows us to tie it back to workflow, thereby then initiating the ability to automate and orchestrate. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about, we talked a little bit about some of the use cases. There's a journey to get there. You don't get to a system of security automation where everything's whiz-bang, magic pixie dust, everything's automated overnight. There's a progression to get there. Some of you are well on the journey, I'm sure, and doing many things along the way. I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a picture of how we look at the journey, to get to a system of security automation. We go through 3 phases: modernize, transform, innovate. Essentially, crawl, walk, run. You start off in modernization. This is where you're bringing, you start off by bringing things in like security incident response, like vulnerability management. Maybe you're not doing a lot of automation to begin with, but you know what? You start associating some workflows. You start tying some of the security processes back to IT service management processes. As we get into the transform phase, this is where we start to enrich the data that we have, and we start to expand more upon the automations that we have available. Here we'll enrich with threat intelligence data, vulnerability data. We'll start to bring in business context information from the CMDB, assets from our asset repository, thereby allowing us to have better understanding of the business context. And then our workflows are able now to start to take advantage of that data so that we have data-driven decision making. And then finally, in the innovate phase, now we're starting to take a more proactive approach. We're piecing these things together in a more sophisticated way. We're taking advantage of orchestration. We have scripts that are allowing us to orchestrate out to our configuration automation and our cloud management tools that are available. Certainly this is not a prescriptive way of doing it. You can certainly do things in the innovate phase early on in the modernize phase and vice versa. However, this is generally the pattern of building up through that crawl, walk,
I have to start with vulnerability management. Some will say I have to start with security incident management. Some will say I just want to start with automation. So it really depends on where you're at in your organization, right? But I've seen a really good mix going through that modernize, transform, to innovate.
Okay. So I'm showing that we're very close to the end. So I just, before we wrap up, there are a couple of use cases out there, a couple of organizations that have been down this path of security. Two that I've called out, AMP, which is a financial services down in Australia and New Zealand. They implemented vulnerability response and security incident, threat intelligence as well. They did a lot of automating of change management. That was where they made a big investment in the automation side of this. By being able to link their security incident response to change management, they were then able to automate the response to a cybersecurity event. As a result, they had a 60% reduction in their vulnerability response time. I think 70 days was the metric that Mike mentioned before. And that was just a response. And then they were able to reduce their resolution time by 30%. FSA, Freedom Security Alliance, which is a managed security services provider here in the US. They implemented security incident. They did some integration with Rapid7 and Darktrace. The big thing that they were doing was that their big challenge was notification and orchestrating communication with all of the various parties. And as a result of implementing ServiceNow and using workflow, they were able to bring down, they had a 40% reduction in their security incident investigation times because they were able to corral all the people that they had together. They also did something very interesting. Because they were a managed service provider of security service, the customers of theirs that used ServiceNow and had ServiceNow CMDBs, they integrated that, and that would allow them to speed up configuration collection and allow them to enrich their data and make better decisions because they had all that information available in their system, and then they can then leverage workflow and orchestration to then react to that. So that's those two. I won't go through the top takeaways. I'll actually pause here now because I got the signal to stop, and the timer over here is telling me we're essentially out of time. I know we had at least one question. I wanted to open up the floor to Q&A. So you had a question. Exactly. Yes. So we've automated the business service mapping. We've related that down to the infrastructure, and now we want to relate that to the security incident to give us that business context. Yeah, so actually this is not the trusted security circles. This would be integration for vulnerabilities and threat intelligence. However, I would put trusted security circles in this layer. That's a ServiceNow capability that's built within the platform. Yeah. For lack of having.
Yeah. So go forward a little bit. Go to the journey again. So it really is where you're at in that modernization. If your CMDB is not there yet, you're like, well, I can't do this yet. It's going to take time. It's a journey that's never ending. Yes. But the idea is that in there, if you have a system of reference or record of whether it's IP data, whether it's stuff in QRadar or an asset system that you can use as that system of record, that can be tied in as well, right? I mean, I've got organizations that are using things from Tanium and other tools that are bringing that discovery information in, enriching what they have in their CMDB, which may be good or not so good, but it's enriching that data enough so I can start bringing those business services context and understand that priority. I always want to do it with our CMDB, but at some point, it's like, where That could be a great place. That could be a great place, yeah. Yeah, it is worth bringing in, absolutely.
But we're out
We're-
of time. The next group needs to come in. Why don't we, Mike, we can step outside, and if anybody wants to ask us additional questions, we'll be available right outside the door over here.
Yeah, we'll be available at the bar.